Welcome to the Grown Up Table, where we have conversations on life and character. My name is Grant Swartzwelder, and I'll be your host for this journey. First of all, let's set the table for today's presentation. The topic is, why do airlines suck? Well, we can give you a variety of reasons. Cramped planes, longer travel days, lower customer approval, staffing issues. Why is all this? Well, it's because of deregulation, focus on profitability, a whole host of reasons, and that's what our speaker will be talking about. Let's also talk a few numbers here. 37%. That's what airline customer satisfaction is. Well, last time I checked, that's not really a rating. To me, that's almost a cry for help. Another number, 68%. That's on-time performance. That's really kind of more of a suggestion than an actual percentage. Seems like we should be able to do better. And lastly, customer complaints are up 29% in the last year. The airlines heard this number and they kind of accepted the challenge to make it even more difficult. So to discuss all of this today, I am so fortunate to have Blair Pomeroy, a long friend of mine, but more importantly, he has over 30 years of airline industry experience, working directly for airlines, working as a consultant. He has done kind of everything you can do within the airline industry. He's worked in 30 different countries and 6 different continents. When he was with the major airlines, he did route structure, seating. You can almost say that he's the one responsible for airline sucking. So we'll challenge him to see if that's the case or if he can explain what his reasons for our assessment that airline sucking is. Blair, welcome to the Grown Up Table. So happy to have you, and look forward to getting your response to my accusation that you're the one responsible for all of this.
Well, now that you've thrown me under the bus, Grant.
That is the best thing to do to a guest, is just immediately throw them under the bus, and I do that very well. So no, I obviously you're by yourself is not responsible, but I look forward to hearing your presentation on kind of what your assessment is as to what those items are. We mentioned several different topics. I know you've got a presentation that we'll kind of use as a kind of the format to talk about this. So let me turn it over to you, Blair.
Okay, thank you, Grant. I don't want this to be a presentation on, I think it's always best when it's a discussion. But I now know my mission is to try to get the blame off of me and put it somewhere else. But let's start the story back in 1974, and then compare it to today. And I'm saying 2024 because we have data for 2024.
And it's a good round 50 years, so it sounds good too.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on, I'm just going to take a second and get rid of some things that are some Zoom things that are on my screen. So let's look at this 50-year span and well, not in the middle, but what changes it. Hold on, there it is. Having some technical issues. 74 and 2024 separated by the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978 during the Jimmy Carter administration. Prior to the Deregulation Act, the government basically told airlines where to fly and set rates. I'm in Pittsburgh today. One of the routes that they mandated was United to fly from Pittsburgh to Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? How many people flew between Pittsburgh and Chattanooga, Tennessee in the 60s and 70s? Probably a handful a day. Now, airlines make all their own capacity, network capacity, meaning fleet and network, route structure, and pricing decisions. Completely different world. How did 1974 look before deregulation? This is a picture of an L-1011. I think this is, I don't know if it's Delta or Eastern. L-1011, very wide plane, eight abreast initially, and then they moved it to 9, but very comfortable. Originally, you see folks had 20 inches in their economy seat. This isn't the first class or business class. This is an economy section. right? You see how spacious it is? They've got 35 35 inches in front of them. It's called pitch, and 20-inch seats. Uh, and the plane was 59% full on average. Oh, I gotta move my little windows away. So excuse me a second. Uh, during this regulation period, the government allowed slow capacity increases, and there were very few entrants. Really, only one that came near deregulation was Southwest, came in the 60s. Apart from that, it was all the legacy guys that you know today. Prices were high, so very few people could afford to fly, even economy. Keep this figure, I'll come back to it again, but people paid on average 42 cents per seat per mile, and that's in real dollars. I'll come back and put that on the screen, but we're going to compare it to where we are today. I already mentioned the planes were only 59% full, and about 200 million people flew in 1974. Since the government controlled pricing and routes, competition was mainly around the quality of the seat, the movies, what we call soft product food, and fuel was moderate, right? Apart from the oil shocks in the 70s, fuel was really not a major income statement item. Let's take a final look, Grant, at that L1011 called the wide ride. And now we're going to replace it with a plane that's slightly less, it's a slightly smaller tube. 2024. Again, airlines are making all their capacity decisions, but we're stuffing these planes full of seats. This plane, the 787, which is one of the newest, it's Boeing's newest aircraft. The only newer aircraft out there is the A350 from Airbus. But this is considered a new aircraft still. It was designed for 8 seats across in economy. Only the Japanese carriers really took the 8 across. And, Japanese tend to not be the biggest people in the world. But they took the 8 across. Everyone else took the 9 across option. They had to take noise insulation out of the plane so that they could make the walls thinner to get that extra seat. So we've gone from 20 inches of width and the L1011 in the mid 70s and vertical space of 35 inches to 17 inches. We've lost 3 inches and we've lost 4 because the pitch is now 31, right? Obviously, during this period, there's fierce competition still around price. But once the regulations were removed, there was a surge in demand. So fierce competition, prices went down to 16 cents, and I've added all the ancillary bag fees, ticket fees, things of that sort. I've added them onto this revenue per seat mile. It's now 22 cents. It had gone down to 16. But remember, back in 74, it was 42 cents, right? Aircraft are not 59% full. They're 84% full and growing. And we've come close to, we still haven't quite gotten back to where we were before the pandemic, but we're basically 5 times the size that we were pre-deregulation. There's some good news. There's an emerging premium leisure segment. Some people don't want to be tortured, and therefore they're buying up. But one more dimension that we're going to come back to is fuel is nearly twice as costly, not quite as in 74, but some years it's dramatically more, right? Obviously, fuel is variable. So the world in 1974 and 50 years later, 2024, quite different.
So you basically make deregulation, or the statement that deregulation has made it available, flight available to a lot of folks. But with that comes all the hardships that came with it because of the financial struggles associated with it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm summarizing on this page, right? It's just a dramatically different, it's a much cheaper product, but it's a much less comfortable product, right?
And so if they're making less money per mile or per passenger, they have to
Yeah.
make up that other places with additional fees. But in your point, what you're talking about is fitting more people into a plane, going from 8 to 9 seats per row, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come to it later, but we have basically, as we've all gotten bigger, what, 20, 30%
Hey,
bigger
hey, be
in that
careful
50
there.
year span. But our personal space has really, if we include kind of overall space, the load factor, which is a percent of planes full, uh, we probably decrease personal space by half, right? So you basically, it's half as expensive, but you have half the space.
So that
Uh,
creates uncomfortable physical space, but also uncomfortable emotional space because now you have people leaning on you and breathing on you and just being near you. So it creates sounds like a pretty good situation for customer service or perception of the customer experience to be quite lower.
right. And there is a bit of a silver lining for the airlines in this, which I'll come to in a second. I'll hold that thought for a second. So to try to answer your question, I've already hinted at why do airlines suck, but let's root it in the economics if we can, Grant,
Please.
which is you've already laid it out. On the revenue side, you know, fares, and again, I'm including ancillary revenue, which is so surged. Uh, the two main buckets here are basically fares and ancillary revenue, and how much revenue you put in the plane. So capacity utilization.
And not to mess you up here, but it seems like nowadays it's all the ancillary type revenue also, and maybe you are including that in your fares, but that seems to be where
Yeah,
really people are hitting people over the head, especially Southwest, where now they're charging for bags, which is a monumental change. So, I'm sorry, keep going.
yeah, no, no, no. I have to be careful because it's not very far away from you, but my dear buddy is at the helm there. Uh, and of course they have Elliott management. They've got you know, I won't say a value extractor, but
I think you could
they've,
say that, or
yeah,
you
we could
could
say
even
that.
maybe be a little more,
Oh yeah,
but we shan't.
not quite yet. Yeah, we'll become more raw as we progress. So revenue, we're going to look at the fares and capacity utilization. Cost, there's jet fuel, number one now income statement item, and we'll capital costs. The number two is crew related cost, which we're not going to touch on here, but it is big and it's temperamental, mostly unionized. But let's set the stage for here you are, you've crossed the transom from regulation to deregulation, and what's happened, your fares and total revenue take per seat mile, right, the mile each seat flies, has gone down. Passenger seat mile, I should say, because there's a passenger there. It's halved, right? It's basically halved. And at the same point, fuel is nearly double. So you were already marginally profitable in regulation. You were just okay profitable, utility profitable. Now, two big items have gone south on you. How are you going to recover that? Right. And that's what the airlines have been all about recovering. But before they recovered, they went through top left a wrenching journey, right? Companies, I'm not talking about the new companies that have come and gone, but let's think of some of the old kind of matriarchs of the industry. Eastern, the largest airline in the world by passengers. United was largest by miles flown. But Eastern gone, Continental gone, Pan Am gone, TWA, Northwest, US Air, which used to be US Airways with US Air Allegheny before that, they're all gone. Right? They couldn't make the transition. United now again finally United was the biggest carrier in the world besides Aeroflot, which was Soviet Union controlled in 1974. It now is just again becoming the largest again, but they went bankrupt in 2002. Delta uh, bankrupt in 2005, American in 2011, and Southwest is on the ropes. So
So in theory, all these bankruptcies should actually help their capital structure, help their cost structure, and make it easier for them to have profit.
you're right. Even with that, even with uh, basically chucking their union retirements and renegotiating their aircraft leases, uh, they still, I mean, even today, only two of them are really returning cost of capital, United and Delta, and not by a lot. American Southwest are not returning their cost of capital. Uh, in fact, the airline business has turned cumulatively profitable in 2014. From Kitty Hawk to 2014, it right up into 2014, it was a cumulative loss position. So you're not going to be surprised
Yeah, that
that,
doesn't sound like a really good business, does it?
well, why do you think I would? Well, you can't blame it on me. I went to it to try to fix it, Grant. No, you can't blame it and
No.
say that I was
This one you get a pass on.
okay. So, but airlines until very recently have been at the bottom of the performance. Uh, it's such a complex business. So, yeah, does a flying experience often suck? Certainly. Are airlines causing you to suffer because they're taking money to the bank? I think I think not. I think not. But they are fighting back and they become much more profitable apart from the pandemic. They've become much more profitable, partly because they've convinced the government through lobbying to let them merge so that they're all twice the size. But let's talk about some of the things that they're going. And interrupt me at any point, Grant.
Yeah, well, I do have a
Right.
question. And this might be for simplicity, you focus on fuel and capital, but how does labor fit into that? Because it seems like there's a host of labor out there between flight attendants, pilots, ground folks, and you always hear unions, negotiation strikes. So it sure seems like labor is a huge issue as well. Uh, can you kind
I
of
mean,
address?
that's the second biggest expense category, and particularly the pilots. It's very hard to replace them, right? Because you, if you fire them or lock them out, it's going to take you months and months and months and months and months.
Well, you got rid of so many of them during COVID because of that issue, and now you can't get them back. Is that's how I
Yeah.
understand it? Was that the case?
No, you're absolutely right. And labor really should be on here. The reason
Yeah.
since it's the second largest and they oftentimes extract
And when you say second largest, that's behind jet fuel?
behind jet fuel,
Okay,
correct?
so fuel is
Yeah.
first. Okay.
The reason I don't have that on here is the airlines have been less successful, particularly lately, pulling that lever of the title of the slide is "The Empire Strikes Back," and the airlines have had less success trimming their flight attendant and pilot costs, cabin crew and pilot costs.
Sure seems that
So
one.
yeah, yeah, it's a tumultuous. If we talked about Porter's Five Forces, these guys are basically unionized union suppliers, and when the supplier has more power, the company has less. So I think your point is a good one. So, but let's take let's look into what the airlines have done to try to stay near solvent, right? And we'll take it one by one uh, on these three categories. And I think you'll see that it explains a lot of your suffering, my suffering, because I'm now out of the industry, except for I do a little consulting advising here and there. But uh, this hopefully will explain why they're crowded planes, as you said,
Yep.
crowded airports, late flights. Let's take them one by one. What they've done to push this up from the bottom of 16 cents per passenger seat mile is they've unbundled previously three things. It's right. The ancillary revenue, they call it unbundling. You're paying for your seat, you're paying for your food, everything. You're paying for your bags. They're price discriminating, right? There was really no price discrimination in the regulated world. Everyone who basically paid close to the same price if you were in the same cabin. If you go on a British Airways 777-300 out of Heathrow, you will probably have maybe 4 classes of service, and you will have 40, close to 40 fare types on that plane, right? And they, even within a certain cabin, let's say a coach or economy, there'll probably be 15 different fares, Grant, and they use price elasticity of different segments to charge people closer to their willingness to pay. Uh, some of it,
Inflict more pain, and they'll want to relieve that pain by spending more money.
yeah, well, they know that you like to spend big, Grant, and they know I'm cheap, so they're going to have identified you as someone that gets a higher fare.
So that's why I never see you sitting next to me on a plane. You're way in the back.
Yeah, that's why I'm not drooling on your shoulder. Correct.
Good.
Um, and you know, they've exploited the concentration in what we call fortress hubs, right? The consolidation of the industry has allowed these gigantic hubs where the folks that live in those cities pay a big premium to fly nonstop out of there. Delta in Atlanta, American at DFW, United at San Francisco and Newark. You know that, Grant.
Yes.
That's delivered. It's basically monopolistic pricing, and they're exploiting it. And they have introduced, because people can't take all the torture, they've introduced new high revenue. They've always had premium products, but they're really pushing the premium product. But what's new is the premium leisure, right? People are going on vacation. A lot of them are spending three, four, $5,000 for a trip to India instead of spending $1,000 in coach. They just can't take the torture. So the airlines are pulling the revenue lever, the fare levers, but mostly what they're doing has been packing more people on the planes, right? First of all, they're putting more seats on the planes. The 777 for its first half, it's about a 25-year-old plane, everywhere, ubiquitous, but it was designed for 9 across. Nobody had 10 across for the first 15 years until I think Air France and Emirates put 10 across. And now everyone has 10 across. It's a very tight seat. And I've already mentioned how the newbie, the 787 was designed for 8 seats across. And somebody had the idea is if we take noise insulation out of the sidewalls, we can squeeze it and reduce people's seat width. We can squeeze in another seat. So more seats, and also putting rows, buying thinner seats. We have new seat technology so that we can have thinner seats and put them closer together. So planes have seen many more seats, and we're also putting more bums in seats. That's the percent filled we call load
And you're
factor.
talking capacity utilization on a plane, but it seems like there's also fewer flights, which is forcing all those people into those planes.
I actually think that there are way more flights. They're
Really?
just on very small planes,
Okay.
which is what we'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
But I think it's pretty easy to say in the one of the things that's happened, if fares have dropped by half in real terms, your personal space has dropped by half.
And I like personal space, so that's not good.
You just don't want to sit next to me. You've always been that way. We went to school together and you didn't want to sit next to me. So uh, let's think on the cost side, right? It's nearly doubled, as I've mentioned a few times, but you know, airlines now think about every pound, kilogram of metal in the sky, and they will use the smallest aircraft possible. And we now have narrow bodies that can fly, gosh, they can fly 10, 11, 12 hours even, right? Used to be in the 74, the longest the plane could fly is Detroit, San Francisco, about 4 hours. Now they can fly almost 12 hours,
Hmm.
right? A narrow body. And even a regional jet can fly across the Atlantic. So we can save a lot of jet fuel. I should say they, so you don't blame me, by putting lots of people in very small aircraft, right? You used to have to take a very, very big plane because they were the only ones that had the range. Capital, well, smaller planes are also cheaper. Um, and even though we've had a five-fold increase in people flying, we have not seen that type of response in airlines, right? In airports rather. They're stuffing people into these airports. You remember where I think in one of the debates, Joe Biden's called LaGuardia third world airport, and now they've had a complete makeover. But they've been wildly resistant to investing in in new airport capacity. So the airports are, I mean, Newark, San Francisco, LA. I mean, they're just stuffed full of people.
Yep.
Uh, and here's one to your point of them being late. We've increased asset utilization by flying planes longer, right? 8 hours in 74, now 11 hours, right? The problem with that is, anything that happens earlier in the day, because things don't have, there's no buffer in the aircraft rotations, that you get knock-on effect. My daughter last week flew Southwest, and she's supposed to leave at 9 p.m. Pittsburgh, Tampa, and they moved her to 2 a.m., right? Because something went wrong in the middle of the day, and you know, they don't want to lose the revenue, so they're gonna fly the plane to completion. And she got in at 4 in the morning when
Mm,
she was supposed to get in before midnight. So,
that's amazing.
um, yeah. The enablers we've already talked about. New aircraft that are small aircraft can go wide body range. That's new. That's bad for you. There's much thinner. I mean, particularly in Europe, have you seen some of these seat seat backs on EasyJet, et cetera? I mean, they're just absolutely 2 inches thick, and anybody does anything in the seat back, you can feel it. Here's a big one that's is really, really important. This was actually invented in Dallas, Grant, by Bob Crandall at American Airlines. They call it revenue management technology, mostly around pricing techniques, right? Airlines have become so good at forecasting demand. Used to be, you couldn't stuff a plane full because you never knew who was going to show up, and you didn't have overbooking. Right? Now, they have a very, very good idea after 50 years of doing this, who's going to show up, and they can overbook for the people that they know won't show up, to make
Yeah.
sure the planes are as full as they can be. What do you think of that, Grant?
Yeah, well, you hear examples where folks or the airlines offer money, and I guess it makes more sense for them to offer money for you not to fly so they can handle some of that overbooking than it is to book it properly and maybe have a few empty, and you make more money
Yeah,
all the
that's
way
right. I
around.
mean, the worst thing is to have an empty seat that could have been filled. That's called spoilage, right? And we can never get it back, because once that flight
It's gone.
from Dallas to let's say Pensacola leaves, you can never resell that seat, right? It's gone. So the airlines will even overbook to the point where sometimes they have to look for bump folks off. They look for voluntary bumping, but they have the right to involuntarily bump you, because of their overbooking, if they can't lure people off with vouchers.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, so do you have a final point on that slide, or otherwise I've got a couple of
You know what?
questions
I'm
for
just
you.
going to talk about. We already talked about price discrimination, right? They do segmentation. They have cherry picked demand. They keep the best demand for the high flights, but they've moved excess demand into valleys. So you notice that it used to be that there were certain times of the week where nobody was flying, but the airlines have used these technologies to fill the valleys. Uh, the good thing is you can now pay for a non-tortured, except for flight delays, you can now pay for a non-tortured product.
Yep.
So anyway, what I was saying is most of this explains why planes are crowded, airports are crowded, and planes are late.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. Let me offer a couple other things to get your input on. You hear about technology failures and old technology. You saw that with Southwest a couple years ago. You've seen not having an investment in that, and so you have issues with the the reservation systems crashing and it having issues. Um, what's your position on that? And then the other thing is, we alluded to this with the pilots, but staff shortages and issues with that from coming from COVID and how they got rid of folks, and now they have a smaller pool that they're trying to reload. Are those issues as you still see them, staff shortage and technology?
Yeah, let's talk about technology. Well, if you're trying to minimize capital, right, then you would spend less on technology as well, right? In
Sure.
Southwest, they had a business model that worked for decades, and then it was basically uh, the best parts of it were gobbled up by the legacy carriers, the United, Deltas, Americans, right? And it left Southwest exposed, but I think they didn't have the brain power to reinvent themselves because they'd been doing the same thing for 40 years. And they had also grown large and they didn't, um,
Well, that seems to be the message that Elliot is sending out, that they need
yeah,
new life
yeah.
to change things up.
Yeah, I mean, I actually know the guy that's on their board, guy that worked with next to United. Super smart, probably the only billionaire. Rakesh Gangwal founded Indigo in India, but I think some of the things he's pushing are right. They have underinvested in technology and kind of pressure testing their business model. Yeah.
Paying the
Uh,
consequence. What about staffing? Where do you think they are on that? Or the industry as a whole?
I think staffing is okay. I mean, I don't think they want more staff than they have. I just staff are very, very expensive, right? I mean, people want to be paid a lot of money for, you know, living wages now, and the model doesn't support it. And particularly when you're competing on long haul with the Qatar's, Emirates, Gulf Air, Etihad's of the world who use subcontinent labor, maybe a tenth the cost, but these guys work 11-hour days, 6 days a week. And now, and you can see the market share move from Lufthansa with German law to Emirates because they just can't compete, right? So these guys are trying to be staff lean and use technology. It's slowly working, right? They have the upgrade list on the screen, so you don't have to talk to a gate agent. A lot of times there's only one gate agent versus two. And so, yeah,
Well,
but
and
it
with,
is
like,
clunky.
your baggage,
Transition.
you have to get your own, they have the kiosk for that. There it does seem like, just like Walmart, changing how you check out, they're trying to automate the process and eliminate personnel. But does that have an effect on customer service and how, customer experience is received?
Yeah, well, no doubt, right? I mean, I anything goes wrong, the technology is not capable of really. It's capable of being efficient in a given mission. If the mission changes because there's a gigantic ice storm or something, it doesn't respond well, right? And that's when you need people, but there are, we can't keep all those people, all those smart, good people for the 2% of times where we need them. So people suffer.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it.
Blair, this has been a fascinating conversation about, why airlines suck, and, I think we agree they do, and I think you've helped really give us good reasons for what caused that and kind of the history of the evolution from deregulation on forward. So thank you for your time on
I also wanted to make sure that I explained that it's not my fault since you set me up at the beginning. It's not my fault, Grant.
okay. I will adamantly say that it is not your fault, so that'll at least make you feel better on this. So it's well, let's clear the table, so to speak, from a grown-up table with a few thoughts that I'd like to share. It's amazing the airline industry has taken something so magical, flight, and turned it into something that is really kind of a customer service nightmare at 30,000 feet. It's not like I'm expecting champagne and caviar. I just want to arrive at my destination with my bags on time and hopefully have a fairly enjoyable experience. But is that too much to ask? Sometimes it appears so. The airlines have managed getting from point A to point B feel a little bit like a hostage situation where you're just holding on and hoping that you will survive the journey. Um, you know, Blair kind of alluded to this. It's almost like a psychological test that they're putting you through to see how much pain you can handle to go through until you either raise the amount of money that you're willing to pay, or you're at least just so beaten down that you're accepting of the customer experience that I think many of us will describe as not being most optimal. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Grown Up Table and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.